Yeah, it's time to stop watching wrestling now.
Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s with this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, 1987 at online booksellers everywhere.
This Sunday saw the start of the decline of WWE. Now, in the main event for WrestleMania 39, the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes was expected to win the WWE Universal Undisputed Championship from Roman Reigns, who had been the champion for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, Roman Reigns defeated Cody Rhodes due to interference from Solo Sikoa, and many wrestling fans left WrestleMania 39 extremely angry. Now, this decision by allegedly Vince McMahon to change the main event from Cody Rhodes winning the WWE Universal Undisputed Championship from Roman Reigns to Roman Reigns winning the Universal Championship alienated a lot of viewers and basically reminded me of the nightmare that happened at WCW back in 1997 as related to the conclusion of the NWO storyline. Now, back at Starrcade 97, Sting was set to take on Hollywood Hogan, and he was set to defeat Hollywood Hogan and to restore the order of WCW, concluding the story for the New World Order. Unfortunately, when WCW, Hogan did not want to do the job to Sting, and this started the whole process of WCW going downhill because they decided to keep a story going that had basically run its course. And the same pattern is happening here as related to WWE due to WWE and Vince McMahon looking to keep Roman Reigns as a champion, even though most of the audience has grown tired of the Roman Reigns character and him constantly cheating to win. Most of the audience is tired of this heel, and this heel has basically run his course as he has run through most of the roster. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon still believes that he can use a booking story paradigm from the 1980s that turned WWF into a juggernaut. Unfortunately, times have changed, and people do not relate to Roman Reigns the same way they did with Hulk Hogan back in the 80s. Now, back in the 1980s, when I was a kid, Hulk Hogan was a major star in pro wrestling, which had finally gone national, and the sport needed an icon to represent the business, and Hogan was the man to represent the business as he won the WWF Championship from the Iron Sheik. And as he won the championship from the Iron Sheik, he basically ran through the entire roster of WWF heels, from Roddy Piper, who he had a feud with, to the entire Heenan family. However, by 1987, Hogan, in the middle of his 3-year reign, started to get really stale. And I remember being about 13 years old at the time and really getting tired of Hulk Hogan because every match was basically the same. You had Hogan coming out and getting into the match, eventually the heel getting the upper hand, and then after the heel got the upper hand, Hogan would Hulk up, and eventually he would wind up defeating whatever opponent he ran into. And again, the storylines got really stale because everybody basically knew the outcome of most of Hogan's matches, and in the aftermath of the final story of Hulk Hogan's story, where he took on his best friend, Andre the Giant, it basically cemented the conclusion of the Hogan story at that point, And basically, after Hogan defeated Andre the Giant, that's where WWF realized that they had run the course with Hulk Hogan as related to the Hulkamania era up to that point. They realized that they had gone as far as they possibly could, and that's where the new character, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, came in, and we started to get this feud between Hogan, Andre, and Ted DiBiase. And this was the start of building momentum of creating a brand new star, Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, Macho Man Randy Savage had been getting over as a heel as the Intercontinental Champion, and he had a nice dominant run as the Intercontinental Champion. And after he was defeated by Ricky Steamboat, he was brought into the main event, and Macho Man Randy Savage being brought into the main event brought fresh air into WWF and gave us a Macho Man run, which basically took heat off Hogan, who was still in the main event and still getting over. But the whole thing was, with a new fresh face as the champion, it helped build everything back up. And eventually we got some really good stories with Big Boss Man and Akeem, and as related to 1989. And Hogan, again, he got the belt back again, but we had another star coming up, Ultimate Warrior. And these two fresh faces, they helped get WWF out of a rut, because Hogan had been running roughshod over people, but he had gotten boring and gotten stale. And the same thing happened here with Roman Reigns, who currently has run through most of the WWE's face roster, and he's basically gotten so stale that people are starting to lose interest in WWE. And Vince McMahon doesn't see how he's basically trying to relive the past, and ironically passing over the Macho Man Randy Savage, who could have basically breathed new life into WWE. But instead of giving Cody Rhodes the championship and allowing the audience to really reconnect with the product, he continues to keep the Roman Reigns going on as champion, not understanding how he has alienated most of his viewers. Because Roman Reigns, again, the audience has grown tired of him the same way they got tired of Hulk Hogan, and instead of him pulling the trigger on just ending this title reign, where Drew McIntyre should have taken it at Clash of the Castle, it continues to go on, and the audience at this point is fed up with Roman Reigns. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon is so caught up in his ego, he can't see that the audience is tired of his champion. And when the audience gets tired of a character, what they do when they see that they can't make the company stop pushing that character, they walk away from that company. And what could possibly happen to WWE in the aftermath of an absolutely bad main event that aggravated most of the viewers, and a WWE Raw where Cody Rhodes was basically buried? Is what can happen is the same thing that happened to Marvel Comics when they created the all-new, all-different Marvel, and DC Comics when they created the New 52. When customers see that the company wants to double down on continuing to push something that they don't want, what the customer does is start walking away from that company, and they walk away from that company because they see that the company refuses to change. And as the company looks to foster a codependent relationship with them, where they hope to abuse them, what the customers do is stop spending their money on the product. And this is very similar to the phrase "get woke, go broke," and WWE is possibly on its way to going broke, but Vince McMahon doesn't care because he has sold WWE to Endeavor, and since he sold it to Endeavor, he doesn't really care about the viewers. No, all he cares about is he's got his money, and that's par for the course with many of the baby boomers out here. When it comes to many of the baby boomers out here, many of them got an I got mine, screw you mentality. And now that Vince has his money and has his company, he looks to screw over his customers, and that could come back to bite him in the backside, because once people see that the product isn't going to change, they may start changing the channel as related to WWE shows like Raw and SmackDown, because there's no hope of anything changing. And while Roman Reigns may get his over 1,000 day reign and surpass Hulk Hogan, what may happen to WWE is what could have happened to WWF, in that the product has gotten so stale that viewers walk away from it. Now, in the press conference after WrestleMania 39, John Paul Levesque, aka Triple H, said that the story for Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns wasn't supposed to end. And I have to disagree with him, because as a writer with over 25 years of experience and over 80 books published, I can tell you that a story has to end, because if a story does not end, then the audience stops caring about that story. Now, stories have to end in order for new stories to begin, and when a story ends, usually is something that is subjective to a writer, but usually a good writer knows when to wrap up a story, and they usually wrap up a story with a satisfying conclusion for the audience. And the wrestling audience wanted to be satisfied by seeing Roman Reigns defeated, and they wanted to see a new champion crowned. Unfortunately, WWE has decided to continue on with the Roman Reigns story, stating that we're in the third inning of a longer story. Now, as somebody who used to watch the New York Mets in baseball back in the 80s, baseball games get long and tedious over 9 innings, and if we have sat through 2 years of Roman Reigns, then a 9-inning game would be at least 6 years. And that would be way too long for most audiences to even want to stay interested in WWE programming, because at that point it would have gotten so stale that nobody would care about Roman Reigns as champion, and the championship would lose its prestige, similar to what happened at AEW when Sammy Guevara received the TNT championship. And because Sammy Guevara wasn't ready to be a champion, the championship lost its value, in spite of all of Cody Rhodes' efforts to try to reestablish that prestige. Now, prestige is important for a championship, because it's the prestige that makes the audience care, and the audience cares because when they see a story end, that means they can leave with a satisfying conclusion. And I find it, again, kind of hypocritical for Triple H to say, oh, a story doesn't end, when wrestlers' stories end all the time. For example, The Undertaker's story ended at a WrestleMania where he put his gear in the middle of the ring. And when he put his gear in the middle of the ring, he signified that the Phenom character that he had played for many years was finished with his story. Mark Calloway put a period at the end of The Undertaker's story, and when he put a period at the end of The Undertaker's story, he said that the Phenom is over and that that character is done. And when he made his appearance on Raw 1000, he did not come out as the Phenom. No, he came out as Mark Calloway, the American Badass. And as he came out, he looked to pass the torch of The Undertaker to Bray Wyatt. Unfortunately, WWE is not really good at storytelling like they should be. And they go out here and they're saying, oh, the story does not end. But again, stories have to end in order for new stories to begin. And I saw stories end as related to the era between the rock and wrestling era and what they call the new generation era, when Shawn Michaels was defeated by Stone Cold Steve Austin. That at WrestleMania ended the new generation era or new foundation era, and we started the Attitude Era. So stories do end, but this was just a complete mess. And again, because it didn't end the same way Starrcade 97 did not end the NWO storyline, WWE has basically painted itself into a corner, because if a story does not end, the audience just wants to walk away at that point. And it's better for a story to end and conclude in a satisfying fashion than for the audience to say that the story is over, because there's a difference between a Star Wars trilogy and a Superman 4. Now, the Star Wars trilogy ended for most people with Return of the Jedi in 1983, and Return of the Jedi gave us a satisfying conclusion to the 3 movies of the Star Wars trilogy, where we saw the whole story of Star Wars come together. And once that story ended in the original trilogy, many people in 1983 were satisfied with the end of that story, and they were satisfied with that conclusion and were able to move on. However, in the case of the Superman movies, the Salkins decided they wanted to keep the story going, and as they kept the story going, what they did was go out here and make bad decisions, like putting Richard Pryor in Superman 3, adding comedy to Superman 3, and derailing the movie to the point where Superman 4 basically signified the audience deciding that they were going to end their interest in the story. And notice what I've said here. There's a difference between a story ending and the audience ending their interest in a story. And that's what's happened here with WWE's product. They have basically made it where the audience is going to end their interest in the story, because they did not give the story a satisfying conclusion, because the time to make the end of the bloodline was when Roman Reigns was defeated by Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 39. That was the time to end the story. Unfortunately, they decided to make the same mistake WCW did with Starrcade 97, and by not ending the NWO storyline, they basically put the nail in WWE's coffin, which a lot of people think was the finger poke of doom. But the damage was done at Starrcade 97 when people did not get a satisfying end to the NWO storyline. And with this lack of an end to the Roman Reigns 2-year championship, people are just basically tired at this point, because most people's attention spans are really short these days, and they are not looking to sit through 6 more innings of Roman Reigns as champion. They're not looking to sit through 2 more acts of Roman Reigns as champion. The character has run his course, and the sad part is Vince McMahon and WWE don't see where this character has basically run his course. And any good writer like myself can tell you, when you stretch a story too long, that's when you lose the audience, similar to what happened with Matt Reeves' The Batman, which went a little too long and basically fell apart towards the end of the movie. Yes, The Batman was a good movie, but it went a little too long, and a writer has to instinctively know when to wrap a story up. And that's something I've learned from my over years of experience writing over 80 books. I've learned how to wrap a story, and sometimes I plan the end of the story before I start writing the beginning of the story, so I know where the concluding point is. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon thinks that Roman Reigns is so over, but the audience is at the point where they're saying, hey, I'm tired of this character. I'm tired of this story. You may have more stories to tell, but I don't want to listen. And that's where the audience is on Roman Reigns. They are tired of listening to this character telling us to acknowledge him. What they want to do is acknowledge new talent. They want to acknowledge new talent like Gunther. They want to acknowledge other wrestlers like Braun Breaker. They want to see new, fresh faces. And They want to see new feuds and new stories because these characters have basically run their course. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon is still stuck in the past, and he's got this delusion that The Rock is going to beat Roman Reigns. Well, I'm going to have to throw cold water on that whole idea because The Rock is not the big draw like he used to. I mean, he just came off a flop with Black Adam at the box office, and if you look at him in context, this is a 50-year-old man, and this 50-year-old man was cool back in 2000 and back in the late 90s, but we are almost 25 years to the day of the start of the Attitude Era, and The Rock, again, is a 50-year-old man, and the audience of young people don't really know who he is, don't really care who he is. Yes, he was big in Vince's second revival of WWF, but The Rock is an old man compared to many of the younger talents. And again, those younger talents need to be the ones that go out here and shine, because a lot of people looking at The Rock beating Roman Reigns, Vince may think that that's a big draw and a big ticket, but that's not going to be a big ticket with many of the younger viewers who are going to sit there and say, who is this old man? And they're looking at him the same way my cousin's generation was looking at Hulk Hogan. They're looking at him as an older man. And sadly, because many boomers don't understand the concept of time, what they do is believe, oh, I can go out here and push this guy, but this guy is not over like you think. And again, one of the reasons why Black Adam struggled at the box office is because The Rock was 50 years old. And again, a 50-year-old man playing a hero that's very hard to sell. And again, while Robert Downey Jr. might have gotten away with it because he was Iron Man for a while, again, these actors are really old. And again, Dwayne Johnson is an older man. And a lot of people aren't going to be like wanting to believe that he can go out here and beat Roman Reigns. And again, people who knew him, that was, again, 25 years ago. And that's what flies over the head of 77-year-old Vince McMahon, who still thinks that he's young and hot. No, you're an old man, and you need to understand that the business is changing, and the business has changed a lot from the rock and wrestling era. The business has changed a lot from the Attitude Era. And if you don't understand that things are changing, you will be on the road to creating another Starrcade 97, and that Starrcade 97 will start the decline of WWE, similar to WCW, and that's what I saw at WrestleMania 39, the start of the decline of WWE, and that was reinforced by that absolutely horrible Monday Night Raw, again, just showing me that you have an out-of-touch guy. And most people are sitting there saying, oh, the possibility that they have to wait for Vince McMahon to pass away in order for things to change. Well, I said the only way things change is if you stop spending money and stop watching the product. Because when the networks start seeing the ratings drop, and when Endeavor starts seeing the ratings drop, that's when they're going to realize that Vince's archaic approach to wrestling and sports entertainment has run its course, and it's time to go in a new direction. Only when they start seeing the money start dropping the same way Warner Brothers and Disney are seeing their money drop, that's when the people at Endeavor will realize you've basically messed up your product, and this messing up of your product is because it's just a complete mess. And again, it's a sad day for most wrestling fans these days because a lot of people thought AEW would be an alternative, but Tony Khan can't write a story and he can't develop characters. So it's a sad state of affairs with pro wrestling at this point. And at this point, it's just time to just stop watching the product overall, and it's just time to move on to something else, because the only way for the product to get itself together is if the audience walks away. And that's what I see happening at WWE now that they've just made a mess of their main event. They have made a mess of their main event, and for WrestleMania, which was supposed to be the beginning of new stories, but because they refused to end the Roman Reigns storyline, it's the beginning of the end of fans' interest in WWE at this point. Now, if you want to pick up my book that's a tribute to my love of pro wrestling, ISIS the Main Event, you can find that book on Amazon.com and other online booksellers in paperback and Kindle format. And if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy fiction, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and other novels I've done like Eternal Night and the Thetas, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.